Today marked the 5th anniversary of Willow Morrison and Julian Spencer's relationship. Clutching a large bouquet of roses, she decided to surprise her boyfriend. As she reached the door to Julian's office, she was already imagining his delighted face when he saw her. However, her hand, raised to knock, never made contact with the wood. The office door was suddenly thrown open from the inside with great force. She was knocked off balance, stumbling and falling to the ground. The stems of the roses she had personally prepared for Julian dug deep into the palm of her hand. "Are you okay?" A familiar, concerned voice came from in front of her. Willow gritted her teeth against the pain and pulled the thorny stems from her hand. Blood gushed out. She was about to let her emotions flare, but then she saw Julian carrying a woman bridal style. His face was etched with worry, and he hadn't even noticed her, injured on the floor by the doorway. So his words of concern weren't for her. But as she got a clear look at the woman in his arms, Willow's pupils contracted. She froze, stunned. Scarlett Hawthorne, it was that same deceptively sweet, devilish face. A roar filled Willow's mind, and her face turned deathly pale. The deep-seated pain from her memories surged like a relentless tide. Her chest heaved violently, and she could almost feel the long-healed scars on her arms burning anew. A full-blown stress reaction seized her body, making it difficult to breathe. Summoning every ounce of her strength, she spoke, her voice hoarse. "Julian, why is she here? And why was her fiancé being so intimate with Scarlett Hawthorne?" "What do you mean, why is she here?" "Scarlett is my friend. She just got burned, and I'm taking her to the hospital. Don't block the door." Julian didn't seem surprised to see Willow at all. In fact, he seemed annoyed, unwilling to waste another word on her. Because the woman in his arms, Scarlett, was now looking up with tear-filled eyes. "Julian, it hurts." Julian's heart immediately went out to her, and he gently blew on the burn. In the midst of their tender interaction, Willow was the outsider, a complete stranger. She didn't even have time to be angry at Julian for treating her so cruelly for the first time. She just felt the love she had so carefully built in her heart begin to crack and crumble. In that instant, she realized everything was returning to square one. Returning to the darkness, to the point where she was covered in wounds with no light in sight. Just then, a rush of footsteps sounded from behind Willow, accompanied by an anxious male voice. "What's going on?" The voice was incredibly familiar. It was her brother, Caleb Townsend. A sting of bitterness filled Willow's eyes. Julian's actions had just pierced her heart. Now that her brother was here, her grievances burst forth. "Brother!" Slap. What greeted Willow was not comfort, but the sharp, crisp sound of a palm striking her face. A searing pain shot through her cheek, and the metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. Caleb's face was a mask of fury. "Willow, what did you do to Scarlett?" Stunned by her brother's furious accusation, Willow was utterly bewildered. The burning on her cheek brought her back to her senses with a jolt. Her brother, who had always cherished and protected her, had actually hit her. Caleb paid no mind to her pale face, his gaze fixed anxiously on Scarlett. "Willow, you're getting more and more out of line. Don't think you can hurt Scarlett just because you're my sister. I'm telling you, if you dare lay a finger on her, I won't let you off the hook." Her fiancé and her brother glared at her, their eyes filled with blame and anger. The last thread of sanity in Willow's mind snapped. She stood there, frozen, the wound in her hand not even a fraction as painful as the gaping hole in her heart. Scarlett Hawthorne was the woman who had bullied her relentlessly for 6 whole years through junior high and high school. "Caleb, please don't blame Willow. It was my own fault. I was careless." Scarlett, still nestled in Julian's arms, spoke in a weak, soft voice as a single, perfect tear rolled down her cheek. Her pitiful appearance made it seem as if she truly had been bullied by Willow. Every word was carefully crafted to point the finger at Willow for her burn. Hearing this, Caleb's gaze toward Willow grew even more resentful. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say he looked at her as if she were an enemy. And Julian, standing beside them, was so consumed with Scarlett that even if he knew the truth, he didn't say a single word to defend Willow. "Enough talk, let's get Scarlett to the hospital. I'll deal with you when I get back," Caleb warned her viciously. Almost in unison, the two men pushed Willow aside, carefully protecting Scarlett as they left. The second before the three of them stepped into the elevator, Willow's tear-filled eyes looked stubbornly at Julian. "Julian, do you remember what today is?" But the only response she received was the merciless closing of the elevator doors and a triumphant, provocative smirk from Scarlett. Her expression seemed to say, "See, Willow, everything you treasure, I can take away with ease. The ones you love, and the ones who love you, all I have to do is crook my finger, and they'll drop you in a heartbeat and come running to me. No matter how many years pass, you'll only ever be fit to kneel at my feet, just like before." The sight of those eyes made Willow feel a suffocating fear. She leaned against the wall and began to dry heave. In an instant, her entire world started to collapse. Just yesterday, she was the apple of Julian and Caleb's eyes, cherished and adored. Why had it all turned out like this? It could have been anyone. Why did it have to be Scarlett? Willow had been abducted by human traffickers as a child, and had endured more than a decade of hardship in the remote mountains before being found and returned to the Townsend family. At that time, Caleb was studying abroad, and she had to transfer to a prestigious private school alone. Scarlett was the only daughter of the Hawthorne family, spoiled and pampered since birth. She couldn't stand Willow, always feeling that she reeked of a country bumpkin's poverty. Combined with Willow's timid nature, she quickly became Scarlett's most amusing toy. For those 6 years, Willow's life was a living hell. It wasn't until she started college that Caleb returned to the country, doting on the sister he had thought he'd lost forever. And she also met Julian. Back then, her depression was severe. Her wrists were covered not only in scars from Scarlett's torture, but also in the marks left from her own suicide attempts. The appearance of these two men was the light that pierced the darkness deep within her heart. One was gentle and considerate, the other bold and unrestrained. The world they created for her was filled with warmth. It was with their companionship that she slowly began to emerge from the shadow Scarlett had cast over her life. But she had never told them that everything she had suffered was Scarlett's doing. Because back then, Scarlett's name was a forbidden word. She didn't want to say it, didn't dare to say it. Just hearing the name made her heart palpitate and her body tremble. When she first heard the news of Scarlett's return, Willow had an immediate stress reaction. Her psychosomatic symptoms made even breathing painful. Years of therapy had become useless. She couldn't eat, she didn't dare to sleep, because her dreams were filled with Scarlett's cruel, vicious face. She was even more afraid to wake up, terrified that Scarlett would be standing right in front of her when she opened her eyes. But she had always held on to hope. She thought that now she had a fiancé and a brother, Scarlett wouldn't be able to hurt her anymore. But reality had viciously pushed her back into the abyss. She was all too familiar with Scarlett's tactics today. It was with these same methods that Scarlett had once made her the target of everyone's scorn. She didn't have the energy to wonder how Scarlett had managed to get close to both of them. Years had passed, and she thought she had moved on from the shadow of her past. It wasn't until she saw Scarlett that she understood. She was still living in those 6 years. It was as if she was instantly transported back to her 3rd year of junior high, being doused with urine, her body used as a testing ground for the temperature of a curling iron, being used as a target for volleyball serves, being subjected to a class-wide bullying vote organized by Scarlett. Willow used all her strength to pick up the crushed flowers from the floor. Tears of laughter streamed down her face. "Well then, happy birthday to me." Willow lay on the sofa and slept for an entire day. When she woke up, there was no hysterical screaming, no heart-wrenching agony. Only a profound calm remained, as if all her emotions had been stripped from her body. This was a good thing, she supposed. At least, she thought, she wouldn't feel pain. She took out her phone. The wallpaper was still a photo of her and Julian. In the bottom right corner, a small countdown read, 28 days left. It was supposed to be the countdown to their engagement. She deleted it. There was no point in a countdown to something that would never happen. She had been so terribly wrong all these years. She had placed all her hopes on Julian and Caleb, expecting them to be her saviors. But Caleb's slap had jolted her awake. The consequence was that she now had to bear the price of her salvation, turning into an abyss. But now she understood. Instead of relying on others, true liberation could only come from herself. She didn't need them anymore. Just then, an unfamiliar number called. "Willow, you finally answered your phone." A sweet, feminine voice came from the other end. It was Scarlett. Willow stiffened, her heart clenched, and her fingertips went numb. She almost dropped her phone. "I'm so sorry, Willow. Julian and Caleb have been with me at the hospital these past 2 days. You're not mad, are you? Though they were words of apology, all Willow heard was provocation. Scarlett's voice was full of laughter. I wanted them to apologize to you in person, but Caleb wouldn't even call you. Did you make him angry? Caleb had always been proud. He would never take the initiative to contact her. He was probably waiting for her to admit she was wrong. Julian, on the other hand, seemed to have a sliver of conscience left. He must have realized Scarlett was talking to Willow because he took the phone from her. Willow, I was wrong yesterday. I was just too worried when Scarlett got hurt. Why don't you come to the hospital later to see her? Willow found it laughable. She could ignore Scarlett's taunts, but what nerve did Julian have to ask her to come to the hospital? Why should I? Julian didn't seem to expect such a response, and his tone immediately turned cold. Willow, why are you so hostile toward Scarlett? I already heard from her. You two were classmates before. What's with the attitude? Is it just because I accidentally pushed you yesterday? I'll get you a few extra gifts for your birthday to make up for it, okay? Stop throwing a tantrum. In Julian's eyes, her behavior was nothing more than being unreasonable. Julian, my birthday has already passed. She rubbed the scab on her palm, her voice faint. It was yesterday. There was a distinct silence from the other end. Willow felt a wetness on her cheeks and suppressed the bitterness welling up in her heart. Also, yesterday was our 5th anniversary. Since it's already passed, it doesn't matter anymore. You guys stay with Scarlett. And don't bother coming to see me for a while. Willow didn't want to hear Julian's response and hung up the phone decisively. How ridiculous. For a moment, she thought she had detected a hint of guilt in Julian's silence. But so what? Slap her and then offer a piece of candy. Willow had originally planned to let the 3 of them go their separate ways in 28 days. But now, she wasn't going to let them off so easily. In the time she had left, she was going to prepare a grand gift for all 3 of them. An apology only counts when the people who hurt you feel the same pain you did. The Townsends were never particularly good to Willow. They had gone to great lengths to find her only to create a media frenzy that would boost the company's stock, crafting an image of a wealthy family that valued kinship. Aside from Caleb, no one in the Townsend family had ever shown her any genuine affection, and Caleb was merely an adopted son, taken in by the family to bolster their public image. Although he wasn't their biological son, the Townsends valued him immensely. But Caleb was often abroad, and after Willow started college, she moved out of that mercenary household. She decisively moved into an apartment in the city center by herself. Julian and Caleb would visit her often. Although Julian had offered several times to buy her a bigger place where the 3 of them could live together, making it easier for them to take care of her, Willow had always refused. Now, she was only grateful that she had rejected those offers. She changed the apartment's passcode. She never wanted to see them in her small, personal sanctuary again. Her stomach ached. Willow ordered some rice porridge and curled up on the sofa. She suffered from a chronic stomach condition, a direct result of the 6 years of bullying from Scarlett. At first, Scarlett would just put bugs in her food or throw her lunchbox in the trash. Later, it escalated to her head being shoved into a toilet. She couldn't scream for help because that would only force her to swallow the foul, dirty water. Each time Scarlett grew bored, she would invent new ways to torment her. The worst time, Scarlett locked her in an abandoned basement filled with the corpses of dead cats and rats. She could feel the maggots squirming, crawling all over her body. Even after she managed to crawl out of that basement, battered and bruised, she could never wash away the stench of decay. From then on, the mere sight of any food made her nauseous. But the abuser's games never paused. Scarlett often used her to vent her frustrations with razor blades, with fire, with sharp bamboo skewers driven under her already thin fingernails. Scarlett once told her that the most beautiful sound in the world was the sound of her hopeless screams. These endlessly recurring nightmares only ended when Willow got into college. That was when Caleb returned from abroad, and she also met Julian. After starting college, Julian and Caleb had spent a great deal of effort nursing her stomach back to health. But now, the stomach that had been so carefully cared for was aching again. A familiar pain swept through her body. She curled into a ball, cold sweat beading on her forehead. But before the warm porridge could arrive, a phone call summoned her back to the Townsend residence. The last time she had been back was half a year ago. Margaret Townsend, her adoptive mother, was as harsh as ever, her eyes scanning Willow from head to toe with disdain. "When we first brought you back, you were as timid as a quail. Now your wings have hardened. You're out fooling around all day and don't even know to come home." Willow couldn't be bothered to argue with her and asked directly, "Why did you call me back?" To her surprise, Margaret immediately flew into a rage. "What is this attitude? The Townsend family has fed and clothed you in luxury for so many years, and you're still an ungrateful wretch. If it weren't for the Townsend family's backing, do you think you could have snagged a great catch like a Spencer?" Willow remained silent, clutching her stomach as she sat down. Margaret was about to continue her tirade, but caught Richard Townsend's warning glance. With a cold huff, she changed the subject. "You and Julian Spencer cannot get married." "I know. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving." Willow's tone was flat. She didn't care why her adoptive parents, who had always used her to curry favor with the Spencer family, had suddenly changed their minds. This outcome suited her just fine. She had no intention of having a future with Julian anyway. A flash of surprise crossed Margaret's eyes, but she quickly recovered. Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "Fine, you vicious girl. You haven't been cheating on Julian behind his back, have you? If you don't want to be kicked out of the Townsend family, you'd better behave yourself. We've already found a marriage alliance for you. With a family 10,000 times more prominent than the Spencers, don't you go around getting yourself dirty. You'll ruin the company's prospects. You deal with Julian Spencer yourself. Don't involve the Townsend family." A marriage alliance? Ha! In the eyes of her family, she, their daughter, was nothing more than an object. Whether it was turning a blind eye to her relationship with Julian before, or now arranging this new marriage, it was all to squeeze every last drop of value out of her. Willow was sick of her fate being in someone else's hands. Her fists clenched tightly. "I am not your tool for a marriage alliance," she retorted loudly, but just then, the sound of several people laughing and talking drifted in from the front door. "Mr. and Mrs. Townsend, I've come to see you," Scarlett walked in, flanked by Julian and Caleb. Julian, who was walking slightly ahead, happened to overhear Margaret's words. "A marriage alliance, Mrs. Townsend. Who's getting married?" Margaret's expression changed. She viciously pinched Willow's arm and hissed, "Don't you dare say a word." Willow's skin was delicate, and a dark bruise was already forming on her arm. She looked at Margaret's warning gaze and said calmly, "Mother said that my brother and Miss Hawthorne would make a great match." Having lived under the same roof for so long, Willow knew her adoptive parents' vanity all too well. They would be thrilled if Caleb managed to win over the sole heiress of the Hawthorne family. Sure enough, after she said this, Margaret cast a satisfied glance at her. Even Caleb's dark expression softened slightly when he saw her. Only Julian frowned, his eyes fixed on Willow. "Oh, Mrs. Townsend," Scarlett wrapped her arm around Margaret's shoulder, feigning shyness and conveniently pushing Willow aside. "I do like Caleb, but Julian is very good to me too." With one simple sentence, Scarlett had already placed Julian within her range of potential suitors. Yet strangely, no one found this inappropriate. Not even Julian himself seemed to think there was anything wrong with Scarlett praising him as a good marriage prospect in front of his own girlfriend. Willow had no interest in staying to listen to their hypocritical posturing. She made an excuse and tried to leave. Scarlett feigned surprise. "Willow, you're being so rude. You've only just come back. Aren't you going to at least have dinner with Mr. and Mrs. Townsend before you go?" Richard Townsend, usually so stern, chimed in, seconding Scarlett with a cold rebuke. "Scarlett is right, stay for dinner." Margaret shot her a look, silently ordering her to keep Julian occupied and not to leave. Margaret wanted her to marry someone more powerful, but also wanted her to keep Julian on the hook, to prevent him and Scarlett from getting together and costing her a potential daughter-in-law. What disgusting calculations. If Julian knew that the woman he had always respected was like this, Willow wondered if he would still be able to smile. Dinner at the Townsends was even more lavish because of Scarlett's presence. The table was filled with rich, spicy seafood dishes, all of Scarlett's favorites. But Willow was allergic to seafood, and her stomach was still aching. Of the dozen or so dishes on the table, there wasn't a single thing she could eat. The strong smell of seafood wafted to her nose, making her feel even more nauseous. Julian put some food on her plate, his tone still a bit stiff. Are you still angry? I said I was sorry. What more do you want? Willow, when did you become so petty? Or have you always been like this? She didn't want to deal with Julian. Her face was pale from the stomach pain, and all she wanted was to get out of there. But her reaction, in Caleb's eyes, was blatant defiance. Caleb slammed his hand on the table and roared. Willow, have I been too easy on you? You have the nerve to put on that face after what you've done? So I slapped you once. Is that such a big deal? I never knew you were so disgusting. Do you want me to tell everyone what you did to Scarlett? Willow was stunned by his shouting. She wanted to argue, to demand what exactly she had done to make Caleb despise her so much overnight. But she no longer had the strength to say another word. The shouts and accusations flooded her ears. You wretched girl, what did you do to Scarlett? Having a daughter like you is the ultimate disgrace to the Townsend family. Scarlett, don't you worry. I will get justice for you. Mr. and Mrs. Townsend, please don't upset yourselves. I've already forgiven Willow. I'm sure she didn't mean to do it back then. Her consciousness began to fade. The only thing she could hear clearly was Julian's amplified voice. Willow, I know everything now. I feel like I never really knew you. Was anything you ever told us the truth? You weren't the victim back then. You were the bully, weren't you? You were bullying Scarlett all along. In Willow's increasingly blurred vision, all she could see was Julian's look of utter disappointment. The surrounding accusations didn't stop. Scarlett was even sobbing softly in Caleb's arms. The gazes filled with blame, disappointment, and anger pierced her heart like steel needles. The gnawing pain in her stomach was nothing compared to the agony in her chest. Why was it like this again? Why did no one believe a word she said? She stood up weakly, her tear-filled eyes looking quietly at Julian. A sob she couldn't suppress escaped her lips. I never lied to you, not from the very beginning. She picked up a piece of shrimp and put it in her mouth, swallowing it almost without chewing. Severely allergic to seafood, a red rash quickly broke out on her neck. I've eaten. Can I go now? They had never once listened to her side of the story, choosing instead to believe someone else's one-sided tale. Such a relationship was laughably fragile. Willow turned to leave, but Julian grabbed her wrist, his eyes filled with disappointment and conflict. Of course, he still didn't believe her. Even though he had seen the scars from the bullying on her body with his own eyes. Even though he had once been the sole savior in her dark world. Willow weakly pulled her hand away. Julian, I'm allergic to seafood. You don't remember that either, do you? He didn't remember her birthday, didn't remember their anniversary, and didn't remember her allergy, serving her nothing but seafood. Even Richard, Margaret, and Caleb fell into a rare silence. Julian, in particular, stood frozen, as if he couldn't process what had just happened. That's right, Willow was allergic to seafood. How could he have forgotten? During their junior year of college, Willow had accidentally eaten a bite of seafood and suffered a high fever. He had been the one to stay by her bedside for 3 whole days. At that thought, a flicker of guilt finally crossed Julian's face. Seeing the situation turning in Willow's favor, Scarlett knew she couldn't let her previous efforts go to waste. She gently dabbed at the non-existent tears at the corner of her eyes. Willow is allergic to seafood. I'm so sorry, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have come to your home. I'll apologize to Willow right now. Willow, don't worry, I'll leave immediately. I won't be a bother to you anymore. Wiping her tears, Scarlett pretended to run out of the house, but she accidentally bumped into Willow. Willow swayed for a moment, but it was Scarlett who shrieked and fell to the ground, her knee scraping red. Instantly, Caleb and Julian forgot all about Willow and rushed to Scarlett's side. Scarlett, are you okay? Does it hurt? Mister, Zhang, get the car ready, we're going to the hospital right now. Scarlett suddenly became incredibly strong, all traces of her earlier weakness gone. Julian, Caleb, don't worry about me. As long as Willow isn't angry, that's all that matters. I'm used to this kind of thing anyway. I can handle it myself. Willow must be angry because you two are being too nice to me. I'm so scared. I'm so scared Willow will treat me like she used to. Her words tugged at everyone's heartstrings. Margaret was furious and anxious. Why are you still bothering with her? She should just get out and never come back. Caleb held Scarlett, comforting her gently. Don't be afraid, Scarlett. I'll protect you from now on. Willow won't bully you again. Julian instinctively wanted to go and comfort Scarlett, but Willow's words from moments ago echoed in his ears. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. But that hesitation was quickly erased by the pitiful look in Scarlett's eyes. "Scarlett, I'll always be by your side too." Julian felt he was understanding Willow less and less. Besides bullying Scarlett for all those years, what else had Willow been hiding from him? Watching everyone anxiously comforting Scarlett, Willow's heart turned to cold, dead ash. The attitudes of Julian and Caleb made it clear. In their eyes, she was the bully. The promise to protect her for a lifetime had transformed into the sharpest of blades, pointed directly at her heart. In this moment, they were the ones ripping open her freshly scabbed wounds. Her tormentor had returned, and she had brought Willow's two most beloved people with her to escalate the abuse. The allergic reaction to the seafood spread rapidly. Even the simple act of breathing became incredibly difficult, and her vision started to blur. Her ears were filled with murmurs of blame and reproach. Her world went black, and she lost consciousness. When Willow woke up, she was in a dark, enclosed space. The familiar, foul stench of decay in the air made her whole body tremble, and she couldn't help but vomit. The allergic reaction hadn't subsided. Instead, her mouth was filled with the taste of blood. This was the Townsend family's storage room. She knew it all too well. For 6 years, the only things that had accompanied her, besides Scarlett's curse-like bullying, were this small, windowless room of less than 50 square feet. After she moved out, it had become a dumping ground for trash, a place even the household staff rarely entered. So, she had fainted from her allergic reaction and stomach pain. And instead of taking her to the hospital, they had thrown her in the storage room. Outside the door, she could hear cheerful laughter. Tinnitus and heart palpitations washed over her. She was in agony, utterly helpless. She didn't know how long she had been lying on the floor before the door was opened. The glaring light made it impossible to open her eyes, and a crushing pain shot through the back of her hand. She instinctively tried to pull her hand back, only to realize someone was stepping on it. It was none other than Scarlett. Scarlett looked down at her, grinding her heel into Willow's hand. "Oh my, Willow, why are you lying on the floor? It's so cold down here you might get sick." Willow sucked in a sharp breath of pain, her entire body shaking. The sound of other footsteps grew closer. Just before they could see her miserable state, Scarlett knelt down, pretending to help her up. But a voice, audible only to the two of them, whispered in her ear. "You're just the same as always, fainting so easily. Not well behaved at all. I haven't had enough fun yet." Those words made her completely break down. She used all her strength to shove Scarlett away. "Don't touch me," Caleb, who had just walked in, caught Scarlett with lightning speed. "Willow, that's enough trying to bully Scarlett again, while we're not looking." Margaret, terrified that her precious future daughter-in-law had been hurt, rushed over and began hitting and cursing at Willow. "You vicious girl, get on your knees and apologize to Scarlett right now. The Townsend family must have done something terrible in a past life to raise such a cruel, heartless daughter." Willow's tears had run dry. She looked up at Julian. Julian stood silhouetted against the light, his expression unreadable, but his voice was filled with disgust for her. "Do you have any idea that when you fainted, it was Scarlett who gave you your allergy medicine? She's been worried about you, insisting on helping you to your room to rest. And this is how you treat her. Willow, you make me sick, sick." Was it because she was sick that she was bullied, became depressed to the point of not wanting to live, and developed a seafood allergy? She screamed hoarsely, "Don't you know that it was Scarlett who?" She thought that the reason Julian and Caleb were treating her this way was because they believed Scarlett's lies. If she told them the truth, would they, however? A furious roar shattered her last fantasy. "Enough," Julian pulled Scarlett into his arms. "I won't believe another word you say. Apologize to Scarlett or we break up." Caleb added a final, devastating blow. "It would have been better if you'd never been found. If you'd been left to be tortured by those traffickers for the rest of your life." Everyone was against her, protecting Scarlett, looking at her with eyes full of something close to hatred. She cried and laughed at the same time, scratching her nails against the floor in a self-destructive frenzy until her thin nails bent back and broke. Thin trickles of pale red blood seeped from under her nail beds, but no amount of blood could compare to the wounds scarring her heart. A tiny, fly-like sound, both desperate and pleading, squeezed from her throat. "Fine, I'll go. I won't be an eyesore to you all anymore. Is that okay?" By the time Willow left the Townsend house, the night had fallen into a dead silence. She couldn't find a taxi, and her phone's battery was already red. It was the middle of the night by the time she walked home. The moment she opened her door, she smelled something in the dim air that sent a chill down her spine. It was the pungent smell of live seafood. She instinctively tried to turn and leave, but the door was slammed shut behind her. "Willow, where are you running to?" The familiar voice made her blood run cold. The next second, Scarlett grabbed her by the hair. Over the years, on Julian and Caleb's advice, she had learned some taekwondo. But in her current weakened state, she had no strength to fight back. Scarlett smiled sweetly, but she looked like a demon crawled up from hell. "I prepared a lot of seafood for you today. You'd better enjoy it." Of course, Scarlett knew she was allergic to seafood. After discovering this fatal weakness in their first year of high school, scenes like this had played out countless times. Watching her eyes fill with fear and terror, seeing her body swell and turn red from the allergic reaction, this was Scarlett's favorite game. Willow's stomach, which had been numb with pain, was violently reawakened. A wave of nausea churned inside her, and bitter, yellow bile spewed from her throat. She was on the verge of despair. "How did you know my apartment's passcode?" She had changed it today, so it couldn't have been Caleb or Julian who told her. Scarlett covered her mouth in disgust. "You are my favorite toy. As a proper owner, how could I not know what my little toy is thinking?" "Willow, you'll never escape from me. We have plenty of time to play. Just try not to faint this time, okay?" Scarlett picked up a still writhing sea cucumber and was about to shove it into her mouth. "You know, I just love seeing you like this. I don't actually like Caleb or Julian at all. I just enjoy the feeling of taking them away from you bit by bit. How does it feel to have all your hopes crushed? You want to die, don't you? But I won't let you off that easily. Those two are such fools. I just say a few words and they believe everything. It's getting boring. So now I want to play a bigger game." Scarlett dragged the barely conscious Willow to the bathtub, which she had already filled with water. Scarlett messed up her own hair, then grabbed Willow's hand and placed it around her own neck. Willow instantly realized something was wrong. Then came the sound of the front door opening. But before she could pull her hand away, Scarlett, with a provocative smile, plunged headfirst into the bathtub. And when Julian and Caleb burst in, the scene they saw was of Willow holding Scarlett's head underwater the next second. Willow's body was yanked and thrown across the room. Every bone in her body felt like it was shattering, crushing her internal organs. Warm blood dripped from her forehead, stinging her eyes and making it impossible to see. "Willow, how dare you?" Scarlett, looking weak, huddled in Julian's arms. "Julian, I was just worried about Willow. I wanted to apologize to her. Please don't be mad at her." Her tears fell like broken pearls, a picture of pity to anyone who saw. Caleb's heart ached for her. "Scarlett, you don't need to apologize to someone like her. You did nothing wrong, you're just too kind, you know that?" He then grabbed the heap of misery that was Willow. "Willow, if anything happens to Scarlett, I'll personally send you to prison." Willow was already at the end of her rope, her body trembling uncontrollably. An intense stress reaction made it impossible for her to form a complete sentence. "It wasn't me, I didn't," but no one heard her faint protests. They just cast her aside. They were all in a frantic rush to get Scarlett to the hospital. Willow's vision blurred. In the final second before the air was stolen from her lungs, she saw Julian carrying Scarlett bridal style in his arms. And Caleb, without hesitation, draped his suit jacket over Scarlett's shoulders. Not a single person cared about her. Looking at the corner of the room, she saw the faint, blinking red light. She weakly managed a smile. Even if she had to use herself as bait, she would drag them all to hell with her. Her vision was completely obscured by the blood from her forehead, and her consciousness faded into darkness. The patient is having a very severe reaction to the seafood. She also suffered a major impact, resulting in radial fractures to the external occipital protuberance and the frontal lobe of the brain. We've performed emergency treatment, and her vital signs are now stable. But as for when she'll wake up, we can't say for sure. An unfamiliar voice pierced her eardrums. Willow fought to open her eyes. Blinding sunlight streamed in, and a bitter, clear tear silently slid down to her temple. "So bitter," she murmured softly. "Are you okay?" A gentle warmth enveloped her hand. A warm palm rested on her wrist. She turned her head and met a pair of deep, dark eyes. The world was still a bit blurry. A tall figure, silhouetted against the light, leaned over her bed. The unfamiliar shadow somehow overlapped with Julian's form. An icy chill instantly swept through her. She trembled, wrenching her hand away, her entire body shaking like a small, abandoned kitten on the street. "Julian, go away," she shrieked with all her might, but the sound that came out was hoarse and weak. The hospital bed creaked under her trembling body. That hand grasped her wrist again. "Willow, I'm not Julian. Willow, look at me carefully, I'm not Julian." The man's voice, smooth as jade, trickled into her ears. After confirming it wasn't a familiar voice, her physiological trembling finally subsided. The world before her was still a blur, and the pungent smell of disinfectant filled her nose. The man raised her hospital bed slightly. Her face was an expressionless mask. Her thin, emaciated body looked like it could shatter at any moment, and her once chestnut brown eyes were now covered with a faint, cloudy film. "Miss Morrison, how are you feeling now? Do your limbs and body still feel itchy or painful from the allergy?" She stared blankly at the white wall in the distance and slowly shook her head. The nurse rolled up the sleeve of her hospital gown. Her slender arm was covered by only a thin layer of pale skin with no excess fat. It was dotted with faint purple specks, remnants of the seafood allergy. Her left arm also bore several long scratches from her own nails, which had formed dark red-black scabs. They were from the day she was locked in that gloomy storage room. The man standing beside her couldn't help but frown. The temperature in the room imperceptibly dropped with the shift in his mood. "Miss Mori, enough." The man's voice was no longer as gentle as before. She just woke up. As the top hospital in the city, which has received tens of millions in medical equipment investments, do you have to rely on questioning a patient who is still in a weakened state to know if she's okay? The young nurse was silenced by the man's imposing presence, and her eyes welled up slightly. Then, "Mr. Blackwood, if Miss Morrison feels any discomfort, you can press the emergency call button by the window. I'll be leaving now." The young nurse turned to leave, a sob about to escape. "Wait a moment," Willow spoke with a raspy voice. "My eyes, why can't I see clearly? Your forehead suffered a severe impact, and your corneas were exposed to the allergenic seafood mucus for too long. You'll have temporary blurred vision. Once the allergy completely subsides, you'll be able to see clearly again." Willow slowly nodded. "Thank you." The nurse left the room, sniffling, leaving a terrifying silence in her wake. When she opened her eyes again, she was alone in the hospital room. Her vision had cleared. The strong smell of disinfectant made her dizzy, so she propped up her still aching head and walked out of the room. "Willow," hearing her name, she instinctively turned her head. "What are you doing here?" Julian's brow furrowed into a deep line. The hand holding a toothpick, about to feed a piece of fruit to Scarlet, froze in midair. "I don't want an orange, I want dragon fruit." Scarlet looked at him with the bashful, starry eyes of a young woman in love. As if reacting in slow motion, she slowly turned her head toward Willow. The next second, she threw herself into Julian's arms, her eyes darting away from Willow. "Julian, it's Willow, she's here again." Julian snapped back to reality, pulling Scarlet's head into a tight embrace and gently stroking her hair. "It's okay, Scarlet, I'm here. Don't be afraid." Willow froze on the spot. The sight of that hypocritical face made her stomach churn uncontrollably. She leaned one hand against the wall and began to vomit as she bent over. The foul smell and yellow, viscous liquid covered the floor. People around her shot her disgusted looks. She stumbled to the restroom and frantically splashed cold water on her face. The biting cold brought some clarity. Her eyes burned. Large tears dripped one by one onto the sink. Her heart felt like it was suffocating. Her nails once again tore open the freshly scabbed wounds on her arm. The sharp pain was the only thing that made her feel truly alive. "Willow, what are you trying to do now? Haven't you hurt Scarlet enough?" A hand grabbed her arm. In the mirror, she saw Caleb's furious face. What was she doing here? She looked down at the loose-fitting hospital gown on her body, the still raw wound on her forehead where the stitches had just been removed, and the bandage still on her hand. Her fingertips were stained with her own blood. Seeing that familiar face in the mirror, contorted with an expression she had never seen before, she suddenly laughed. Her chapped lips curved slightly upward, immediately splitting open a small cut. Blood trickled from the wound, but she felt no pain at all. "Let go of me." She uttered 3 words, her tone colder than ever before, so cold that even Caleb himself was momentarily stunned. I don't have the time or energy to play these house games with you. Since none of you are willing to believe me, fine, I'm the unpardonable villain you all say I am. If you feel so bad for Scarlet, then you'd better stay by her side every second of the day. Protect her like she's the apple of your eye. Otherwise, she turned to meet Caleb's stunned gaze, her voice flat. The moment I get a chance, I will make Scarlet's life a living hell. The moment the words left her mouth, Caleb's hand struck her across the face. The ringing in her ears grew louder, and the surrounding noise seemed to vanish as if encrypted. A burning pain spread across her cheek, and her head snapped to the side from the force of the blow. Caleb looked at his raised hand and took a guilty step back. He hadn't meant to hit her. He just wanted to warn her not to hurt Scarlet again. In his memory, Willow was never that kind of person. But that night, he had seen it with his own eyes. Willow holding Scarlet's head under the cold water as if to drown her. If he and Julian had been a second later, Scarlet might have died. He wasn't just heartbroken for Scarlet. He was terrified that Willow might actually kill someone. He couldn't bear to think of the consequences. Heh, she let out a small laugh. In that moment, it seemed the last shred of hope she had for Caleb was extinguished. Willow, he hesitated, wanting to explain but not knowing where to start. Willow looked up, meeting his evasive gaze, and forced a broken, defiant smile. Brother, let's call this slap my payment back to you. This would be the last time she ever called him brother. Willow staggered out the door, only to run straight into Julian, who had followed her in. His face was still contorted with the same fury, but he fell silent when he saw the handprint on her face. He saw a glint of determination in her eyes, but he couldn't be sure. So he reached out and grabbed her wrist. She didn't even turn her head, standing there expressionlessly, letting him hold her. Willow, why are you here? Don't you know how much stress your appearance is causing Scarlet? She's already in the hospital, can't you just leave her alone? Why was she here? It seemed that people without love truly do suffer from selective blindness. Both he and Caleb had automatically ignored the hospital gown she was wearing, assuming her presence was malicious and haunting. I always thought you were a kind girl. How did you become like this? Or were you always this way? He looked at her in disbelief, his face a mask of disappointment. Willow, I'm willing to help you make up for your past mistakes. If you go and apologize to Scarlet right now, I'll convince her to forgive you. Seeing Willow's lack of reaction, he let out a heavy sigh, as if making another momentous decision. It's just that the harm you caused her was too deep. A simple apology probably won't be enough. If you kneel down and kowtow to her and sincerely repent, I'll pretend the past never happened. We can wipe the slate clean. Willow couldn't help but look up at him, her eyes filled with an expression of pure absurdity. She pointed at herself. Me, kneel and apologize to Scarlet? The last few words came out as a choked sob, her eyes taking on a crazed, incredulous glint. You want me to apologize to Scarlet? Julian, I don't need Willow to apologize to me. It's all my fault, don't blame her. Scarlet appeared out of nowhere, her steps unsteady, her eyes filled with timidity as she approached Willow. But this woman, who looked so weak in everyone else's eyes, made Willow's heart tremble. After that night, the mere thought of Scarlet's face terrified her, instantly dragging her back to that cold, dark cellar from 5 years ago. She stood there, forcing herself not to collapse. Scarlet, however, walked over and took her hand. Willow, please don't be angry, okay? If I did anything to make you unhappy or dissatisfied, just tell me. I'll change. I'll do whatever it takes to make you happy. She was standing in a blind spot, hidden from both Caleb and Julian's view. Her eyes were full of arrogance and provocation, but her words were utterly submissive. Her long, manicured nails dug deep into the soft flesh of Willow's palm, making her suck in a sharp breath of pain. Scarlet, you don't need to apologize to someone like her. Julian's initial desire to de-escalate the situation vanished the moment he saw the frail Scarlet. Willow had reduced Scarlet to this state. How could she have the nerve to stand here so brazenly? He pulled Scarlet behind him and pointed at Willow. If you still refuse to kneel and apologize to Scarlet, then... The pain in her hand subsided, and Willow finally came back to her senses. Then what? For the first time, she mustered the courage to look them both directly in the eye. Caleb stood not far away, watching the farce unfold. The two men who had once cherished her most now stood against her, siding with the perpetrator who had thrown her into the abyss. Julian, don't be rash. You and Willow have been together for so many years. How can you let your relationship break down over me? You can't. Scarlett tugged at the hem of Julian's shirt, her voice as faint as a mosquito's buzz, yet loud enough for everyone to hear clearly. For the first time, Willow realized just how clumsy Scarlett's tactics were. That sentence had subtly shifted the focus to her relationship with Julian. So, even if Julian hadn't originally intended to use their relationship as a threat, he was now. Such a simple, clumsy trick, one she could see through in an instant, yet these two men were being played like fiddles. Scarlett, this has nothing to do with you. Stop making excuses for her. My fiancé cannot be a snake-hearted woman who bullies others. Julian closed his eyes, his fists clenched tightly. When he opened them again, they were filled with disappointment. If she refuses to repent, then it's time we ended things anyway. Willow leaned against the wall and walked forward, passing the tightly embracing pair, and weakly uttered, "Then let's end it." Besides, she was supposed to marry someone else now anyway. She paid no mind to the shock and astonishment of the people behind her, and walked straight back to her room. When the man returned, he found Willow sitting there quietly, her bloodless face devoid of any expression. She didn't know why she was in the hospital, and she didn't even care who this man sitting beside her was. She closed her eyes and could hear his strong, steady heartbeat. Drowsiness washed over her, and she let her eyes close. The man would gently tuck her in. When she woke up again, he would bring a straw to her lips. At the other end of the straw was warm, slightly sour lemon gardenia water. As the cool liquid flowed down her throat, her eyes, once as dull as dead ashes, suddenly gained a hint of clarity. "Who are you?" The man let out a low chuckle. "It's been 3 days. You finally remembered to ask who I am." Willow lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry. I went through something bad and my emotions have been unstable." "Thank you, sir. Were you the one who brought me to the hospital?" The man waved his hand in front of her eyes, as if to check if her vision had cleared. "I'm Damien Blackwood. Don't be a stranger. After all, in a few days, you'll be my fiancé. It's my duty to take care of you." Willow was stunned for a moment. She looked at the man's face, so exquisitely carved that every feature seemed chiseled by a master sculptor, and quietly gasped. Fiancé, she finally remembered. A few days ago, the Townsends had called off her engagement to Julian and arbitrarily arranged a new match for her. So, it was this man. The diamond bachelor whom even the Townsend family had to grovel to, and a drop-dead gorgeous one at that. She couldn't help but cover her face and give a bitter smile. In a way, wasn't she the one getting the better end of the deal? She had been in the VIP ward for 3 or 4 days now. Under Damien's orders, bottle after bottle of expensive supplements had been infused into her body. Her face was now much rosier than it had been a few days ago. Thanks to the top-tier, imported scar removal cream, the marks on her arm had completely vanished, leaving her skin smooth and delicate once more. "Drink." Damien brought the straw to her lips. The familiar pale orange liquid in the cup caught her attention. "Is this lemon gardenia water?" Damien nodded. "Yes, it is." A flicker of surprise crossed Willow's eyes. She had just tasted the flavor of lemon gardenia water and had thought her taste buds were playing tricks on her. She thought that besides herself and those two, no one else in the world would mix these two completely unrelated things to make a drink. Even she herself had only discovered this strange combination by accident as a child. She was curious, but didn't press further. Although they had shared a room for many days, they had barely spoken a few sentences to each other and were hardly familiar. She lowered her head to drink. Damien broke the newly returned silence. He took Willow's phone from the bedside table drawer and placed it by her hand. "While you were unconscious and recovering, your phone received many calls. But the doctor advised you needed quiet rest and that your emotions shouldn't be subjected to any major fluctuations, so I took the liberty of turning it off. I hope you don't mind." Willow took her lips from the straw, picked up the cold device, and silently long-pressed the power button. The phone screen lit up, revealing the lock screen, a photo of her with Caleb and Julian. In the picture, Willow was held aloft on the shoulders of the two tall men. All three were smiling, their faces radiant and warm, with a backdrop of blue skies, white clouds, a beautiful ocean, and warm sunlight. It was taken a year ago when they went on a trip to Sanya together. The happiness and warmth of that day felt so close. She closed her eyes, and her nose could almost smell the salty, humid sea breeze. Willow couldn't eat seafood, so Caleb had gone to the supermarket to buy groceries, and Julian had personally cooked her favorite meals. A salty taste spread in her mouth, and she belatedly realized she was crying again. In recent days, during her few waking moments, she would just stare quietly out the window, and tears would fall without her realizing. She couldn't control it. Even in her sleep, she often dreamed of those scenes. The painful memories would creep into her dreams from time to time, images of her being bullied and humiliated by Scarlett years ago, but even more so, the events of that night. Crystalline tears fell as her body, which had been experiencing physiological tremors, became rigid again. She had endured one unbearable night after another, all alone. Or perhaps her world had plunged into an eternal, long night. Loneliness and coldness enveloped her completely, and sometimes even breathing became a luxury. "Don't cry." Damien's dry fingertips gently touched her cheek, softly wiping away the tears from the corner of her eye. She couldn't help but sniffle. When she looked up at Damien again, the pain in his eyes flashed and was gone. Willow forced a strained smile. "Mr. Blackwood, thank you for taking care of me all these days. I'm much better now. I'd like to be discharged as soon as possible." Damien frowned. "What's the rush? Are you in a hurry to find those two bastards who put you in this state?" Willow glanced around the room, then lowered her head with a self-deprecating smile. "Since you're my future fiancé, I shouldn't hide my financial situation from you. On my salary, I can't afford a room like this." To an outsider, such a statement might seem absurd. The great Miss Townsend of the Townsend family couldn't afford a VIP hospital room. But that was the truth. Since being found by the Townsend family, not a single person had instructed the accountant that she should receive her own living allowance. It was impossible for Richard and Margaret. Caleb had by default given her a portion of his own, brazenly saying that what was his was Willow's. And Julian had always made sure she never had to worry about money. But all her designer bags and clothes were not bought by her. They were all gifts from these two men when they were happy with her. But now, they were no longer happy with her. Both of them had become Scarlett's possessions. Thinking of Scarlett, her teeth began to chatter and her body trembled. Damien promptly took her hand. He said nothing, just looked at her quietly. Over the past few days, whenever Willow's emotions became unstable, he would hold her hand, and she would gradually calm down on her own. She dug her nails deep into her flesh, forcing herself not to sink back into the swamp of pain. Damien's method seemed to work. She hadn't had a psychosomatic episode recently. Seeing her gradually calm down, Damien spoke again. "Stay here and rest. You don't need to worry about anything else." Willow returned to her senses, a strained, fake smile plastered on her face. "No, thank you, Mr. Blackwood. I feel much better. And we're getting engaged soon. I have a lot of things to take care of at home. I can't stay here any longer." Damien looked at her with an unprecedented seriousness in his eyes. "Willow, I was originally coming to find you that day to discuss our marriage. But when I saw you, your condition was not good." His brow furrowed. These past few days, whenever he closed his eyes, he could see the image of Willow lying on the ground amidst a pile of stinking fish and shrimp mixed with ice water. "So, if you have any difficulties, you can tell me." Even Willow herself couldn't bear to think about how wretched she must have looked that day. To think her first meeting with her future husband was so humiliating. Willow forced herself not to show her embarrassment. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood, for making a fool of myself." Seeing that she wouldn't budge and was unwilling to ask for help, and having just confirmed with the doctor yesterday that her condition was stable enough for discharge, Damien couldn't press the matter further. He agreed to her request. Just then, his phone rang. He calmly continued to help Willow drink her water while casually pressing the speakerphone button with his other hand. His assistant's serious and respectful voice came through the phone. "President Blackwood, do you need to postpone the 5 p.m. flight to Indonesia? The partners over there have been waiting for you to sign the contract in person for 2 days. If we delay any longer, I'm afraid a new competitor might swoop in and steal the deal." 2 days. Willow's eyelids flickered. Could it be that he had been delaying his work just to stay here and watch over her? She quickly tried to say that he must not delay his work for her sake, but she accidentally choked on the water and started coughing violently. "Cough, cough, cough." Damien quickly patted her back to help her catch her breath. "Mr. Blackwood, did you postpone your work schedule for me? Please don't. I'm about to be discharged. I don't want to affect your plans because of me. Damien shook his head. It's not that important. Since you're ready to be discharged, I'm getting ready to leave too. She finally felt relieved. Even though this man was her future husband, they had just met. It was already a great deal for him to do so much for her. She shouldn't be a burden to him any longer. After he left, Willow also completed her discharge procedures and returned to the place that had been the scene of her humiliation. As she reached the door, her body began to tremble uncontrollably again. The scene that had greeted her upon opening the door that night replayed over and over in her mind. This feeling of being dominated by fear was all too familiar. She leaned weakly against the back of the door, huddled in the darkness for 2 silent hours before finally dragging herself to her feet. She muttered to herself, "No one is coming to save you. Either crawl out or die." She opened the door that, for her, led straight to hell. But the scene she expected was not there. The room before her was the one she knew, untouched by Scarlett's chaos. The warm yellow light, the clean and tidy little apartment, even the dolls were in their usual places. At that moment, Willow's long-taut heart finally snapped. With trembling hands, she closed the door and then let out a heart-wrenching, hysterical cry. She cried until she was exhausted, until she was numb. Then, she pulled out her largest suitcase and began to pack her belongings. Bit by bit, she erased her own traces from the home she had lived in for so many years, her heart already too numb to feel anything. When she came across items related to those two, she casually picked them up and tossed them into a tattered sack, just as they had casually tossed her aside. By the time the once full room was empty, it was the next morning. When the warm sunlight streamed through the window and touched her face, she felt a strange sense of rebirth. And why not? Say goodbye to the past and start anew. As for those 3, she would prepare a grand gift for them. Ring, ring, she answered the call. "Miss Morrison, this is a staff member from the I'm a Singer television program. Our judging panel reviewed the submission you sent in, and we think you have great potential. The competition will be recorded live at the City TV Center Tower in 3 days. Would you be available to participate?" Willow was stunned for a moment. She loved to sing. It was one of the few lights in her dark days. She loved singing, and she was good at it. If her quiet nature and being the new girl in high school had sparked the bullying instinct in the naturally malicious Scarlett, the official trigger was the singing talent she displayed in a music class. Scarlett had been a music prodigy, studying with professional teachers since childhood. And Willow, a country bumpkin who had been away from the Townsend family since she was a child, who had never had a single formal music lesson, was praised effusively by Scarlett's own professional teacher. Jealousy and resentment flooded Scarlett's heart, and thus, the bullying officially began. She had signed up for this competition a year ago at the urging of Julian and Caleb. Back then, they had said that Willow's voice was the most beautiful, angelic sound in the world, and that it would be the organizer's loss if she didn't participate. As for the audition video, she still remembered singing, "When the Wind Rises, I See You." She sang, Julian played the piano to accompany her, and the videographer was the talented photographer, Caleb. She never expected that the boomerang she had thrown a year ago would come back and hit her right between the eyes at this very moment. "Miss Morrison? Are you still there, Miss Morrison?" The voice on the other end pulled her back from her thoughts. "Yes, I'm here. So, Miss Morrison, are you available to participate?" She paused. Even though the person on the other end couldn't see her, she slowly nodded at the air. "I'll be there." "That's wonderful. The official invitation will be sent to you shortly. Please be sure to check for it." The voice on the other end couldn't hide its excitement, but Willow felt numbly indifferent. After hanging up, she suddenly felt a sense of release. Singing was her dream, and even if she was in the mud, she wasn't willing to give it up. She quietly left and moved into a new rental apartment. She spent 3 quiet, solitary days there. She quit her $3,000 a month job, used her savings to buy a not-so-expensive piano, and began to practice. When she appeared backstage at the show's recording, she had returned to her former gentle and serene self. She sat quietly at the dressing table, looking at the person in the mirror. Willow brows, almond eyes, fair skin. She was beautiful in a non-aggressive way, but not the soft, delicate type that inspires a desire to protect. Instead, she always gave off a sense of calm reliability, her features exuding grace and poise. The makeup artist worked on her face, silently marveling. It had been a long time since she had seen such a naturally beautiful woman, with no trace of cosmetic enhancements, just pure, innate beauty. When she changed into a simple, elegant white satin dress, her hair styled in a simple, graceful braid, she exuded a unique kind of beauty. "What are you doing here?" A dark, female voice came from behind her. Scarlett's twisted face suddenly appeared in the mirror. Sensing trouble, the makeup artist quickly packed her things and fled. "I'm a contestant. This is my dressing room. Why can't I be here?" Willow, shedding her usual helplessness and timidity in the face of Scarlett, spoke slowly, her voice calm. But this composure made Scarlett completely lose it. "You don't belong here." She stalked toward Willow in her high heels, grabbed a handful of her hair, and slammed her head against the dressing table. With a loud thud, Willow's forehead began to bleed. Just then, the dressing room door was thrown open, and a swarm of reporters carrying cameras and microphones flooded in, their flashes popping. "Miss Hawthorne, what's happening? Can you explain why you would physically assault your competitor before the competition has even started? Please explain your motive. Are you afraid Miss Morrison will defeat you in the competition?" Scarlett froze on the spot. This was the first time Willow had ever seen her so flustered. Her hands flapped uselessly at her sides as cameras zoomed in and out on them. Willow's eyes reddened, and tears streamed silently down her face. Her hair was disheveled from Scarlett's grip, a few strands clinging to her face, adding to her look of shattered vulnerability. She spoke in a trembling voice, perfectly exposing her wound to the cameras. "To all the reporters, thank you." She bowed deeply, then spoke through her tears. "If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to participate in the competition today. I might be in the hospital right now. I don't want to go back to the hospital. I'm scared. I'm really scared." Scarlett stared at her in shock. Realizing what she was implying, Scarlett lunged at her in a frenzy. "You little tramp, did you call these people here? I really underestimated you to think you'd resort to such a low-down trick to frame me. You can forget about competing today." She raised her hand and slapped Willow mercilessly, again and again. But Willow didn't fight back, sitting stiffly on the floor like a lifeless puppet. All of this was, of course, captured by the cameras, but Scarlett didn't care. She knew very well that there was nothing in this world that money couldn't solve. So what if it was filmed? She had enough money to make these gossiping reporters shut their mouths. In her extreme humiliation and anger, she attacked Willow ferociously, purely to vent her rage. A tiny ant that she had toyed with for years had dared to bite back. She absolutely could not tolerate it if she dared to show up. Scarlett would beat her until she couldn't get on stage. The surrounding reporters all stood there, coldly holding up their high-definition cameras, not a single one lifting a finger to help. She kicked and beat Willow until she was completely exhausted, then flicked her hands and left. As she walked out, she tossed a final threat over her shoulder. "The Hawthorne family will be in touch to buy your cameras. If you know what's good for you, get lost." The reporters exchanged glances for a moment, then filed out of the dressing room. As expected, Scarlett completed her performance on stage flawlessly. It was a piece that demanded exceptional vocal technique, and she executed it with almost no errors, showcasing her professional skills to the fullest and making the contestants who followed her seem lackluster in comparison. The judges' panel gave her high praise, and she won a staggering 430 votes from the 500-member audience, securing her spot at the top. Standing backstage, she held her head high, just waiting for everyone else to finish so she could go up and receive her award. Half an hour later, when the single spotlight on the dark stage lit up, it fell on a figure at the piano. Only then did the audience see her clearly. Willow had changed into a black sequined and glittery slip dress. A pair of high heels with white wings provided a stark contrast. Her chestnut brown hair was gently swept up, and a dazzling diamond tiara sat on her head. The sharp, winged eyeliner gave her an edge of aggression. She looked like a princess from hell, or perhaps a demon. Standing at the side of the stage, Scarlett's panic was visible to the naked eye. She muttered to herself, "How is this possible? How? I beat her up so badly. How could she still be able to compete? This is impossible, absolutely impossible." Caleb and Julian, who had arrived late, were also stunned when they saw the person on stage. "Is that Willow?" Julian's eyes were glued to the stage. He recognized the face, but something about her felt strangely different. Maybe it was her aura. She's playing the piano and singing herself. Where did she get a piano? Caleb's eyes, however, still held undisguised disgust. Just a clown seeking attention. No good can come from a snake-hearted woman like her competing. He frowned, carrying the coffee he had bought for Scarlett, and headed backstage, not sparing Willow a second glance. On stage, Willow had no mind for them. She bowed deeply to the audience. Good evening, esteemed judges and ladies and gentlemen. The piece I will be performing today is Nirvana's Butterfly. I hope you enjoy it. There was still some chatter in the audience. She was the last contestant, and by this point, everyone's patience was wearing thin. Most of the contestants were singers like Scarlett, who had shown musical talent from a young age, or established stars who had been quiet in the music scene for a few years. Almost everyone had a considerable fan base. Willow was the only complete unknown, a total amateur. No one in the audience, including the judges, had any expectations for this inconspicuous contestant who seemed to be all looks and no substance. Only Scarlett, staring intently from backstage, dug her nails deep into her palms, her eyes filled with a jealousy that threatened to consume everything. Willow didn't mind. She raised her hands and pressed the first key on the piano. A low D, then came the second note. As her fingers moved, a somber melody began to flow, a tune that immediately suppressed the mood of the entire hall. She opened her mouth and sang the first line, a little butterfly, withered and beaten into the dust by wind and rain. Her clear, ethereal voice echoed through the performance hall via the microphone. The judges, who had been whispering amongst themselves, fell silent. From that moment on, everyone began to take this unknown girl seriously. The audience members all frowned, their hearts seemingly clutched by her voice. Everyone gradually fell under her spell, as if they were following Willow into an endless abyss. Slowly, the faint sound of sobbing began to emerge from the audience. Backstage, Scarlett stumbled out of the building, knocking over the coffee Julian had specially bought for her on her way out. She pulled out her phone and made a call. A few minutes later, she returned to the studio, smug and triumphant. By this time, Willow's performance was nearing its end. The studio was deathly silent, punctuated only by a few suppressed whimpers and sobs. The entire atmosphere felt like a heavy cage forged from musical notes, trapping everyone inside. No one could escape. As she sang the final notes, a faint sob crept into her voice, yet her eyes showed no fear. Instead, they held the determination of a final, desperate battle, fearless and resolute. With the lonely courage of one who must press forward alone, she broke through the shackles and cages of darkness. When the song ended, she stood up and bowed. The crowd was still immersed in sorrow. It wasn't until 3 seconds later, when a man in a sharp suit in the center of the judges' panel began to applaud, that a thunderous ovation erupted throughout the hall. After the performance, everyone remembered this girl. They remembered her voice, her long, slender fingers on the piano, her sorrow and sadness, her despair and tragic heroism. A female judge, her voice trembling, spoke to the high-definition camera. "Willow, in my heart, you are the champion." All the contestants were called back onto the stage to await the final results. Willow stood in the center, with Scarlett beside her. Scarlett leaned in slightly, speaking in a voice only the two of them could hear. "Willow, it seems I really underestimated you. Compared to the you who wouldn't fight back when I stomped you into the gutter, I guess it's a nice change of pace when the prey occasionally bares its teeth. But an ant is still an ant. This little show of cleverness you've put on is about to end." Willow stood there quietly, a smile that didn't reach her eyes on her face. "Scarlett, for an amateur like me to be on the verge of defeating you in your own professional field, I feel quite honored." The moment she finished speaking, Scarlett's face twisted into an ugly, livid mask. She gritted her teeth. "Don't get too happy too soon." Just then, the host announced Scarlett as the winner. The crowd erupted in cheers, with a few scattered sounds of confusion and disbelief drowned out by the roaring applause. 2 bright spotlights suddenly hit the audience, and the big screen showed 2 tall men. Each held a beautiful bouquet of flowers. They rose from their seats and began to walk toward the stage. Willow silently took a step back, watching her former protectors, Caleb and Julian, walk toward Scarlett with eyes full of affection. She lowered her gaze, her heart inexplicably clenching in pain once more. Amidst the crowd's gasps, the 2 well-dressed men presented the flowers to Scarlett, then stood on either side of her, like two knights guarding their princess. Many of the young women in the audience had stars in their eyes. Who didn't dream of being cherished and protected by two handsome men? A bitter smile touched Willow's lips. She had once had such a dream, but her dream had now been shattered. She took a deep breath and, amidst the roaring crowd, raised the microphone. "I have doubts about Scarlett's win." A clear voice emanated from her, like a bucket of ice water doused on the peak of excitement. Scarlett whipped her head around, her eyes wide and burning with fire. Caleb and Julian looked at her with pure disappointment, mixed with a resigned sense of "I knew it." Julian moved closer to her, hissing, "Willow, I advise you not to cause trouble. Scarlett's win is well-deserved. If you keep this up, I won't be so polite." How would you be impolite? She thought. She slowly took a step forward, her voice as calm as still water. "I believe the champion of I'm a Singer should be a soul-stirring vocalist who can inspire people and serve as a positive role model, not a bully who subjected a classmate to long-term verbal abuse and physical assault during her school years." The statement sent a shockwave through the entire venue. What, a bully? Who's a bully? Our precious Scarlett? What is she talking about? Isn't it obvious what she means? The champion of I'm a Singer, who else could it be but Scarlett? This is complete nonsense. Our Scarlett is so kind. How could she ever bully anyone? Scarlett suppressed the fury in her eyes, standing on the stage looking as if she might collapse at any moment. "Willow, how could you turn the tables like this? It was clearly you who bullied me in school. I even developed severe depression because of you. How can you say this now?" Her eyes were filled with disbelief, and tears streamed down her face, breaking the hearts of her fans in the audience. In an instant, a barrage of curses and insults were hurled at Willow from the crowd, and the situation began to spiral out of control. The show's director, however, was ecstatic. This Willow was a treasure trove for him. First, her outstanding performance had drawn in more than half the viewers. And now, just as the show was about to end, she had created such a sensational, explosive news story. The number of people flooding into the live stream was increasing by the second. At this rate, he was going to be Rich, the female judge who had praised her earlier, now frowned. "Willow, you do have some talent in music, but music that appeals to the masses is what makes a worthy champion. I don't deny your talent, and I very much enjoyed your performance, but one must learn to accept defeat, not cause a scene here." Willow smiled faintly. "Thank you for your kind words, Judge, but I am not causing a scene." "Enough," Julian grabbed her arm, forcibly taking the microphone from her hand. He turned to the audience, his voice filled with indignation. "Everyone, Willow is my ex-fiancé. The reason we broke up was precisely because she subjected Scarlett to long-term bullying during their middle school years and refused to apologize. I, Julian Spencer, will never consent to having such a person as my wife." "Julian?" Scarlett looked at Julian's face with a moved, infatuated expression. So, in the end, she chose Julian over Caleb, but none of it mattered anymore. Only Willow knew it was all an act. Julian confidently took her hand in front of the cameras. "Everyone, the Spencer family and the Hawthorne family are now officially joined by marriage. Scarlett and I will be getting married soon. A kind person like Scarlett is the true princess I am meant to protect." When he said "getting married soon," a fleeting look of disgust crossed Scarlett's face, but only Willow, the outsider, noticed. Caleb, standing to the side, observed Willow's reaction. He saw that she wore a mocking smile from beginning to end, and he fell into a contemplative silence. The sudden news caused a huge stir among Scarlett's fans in the audience. Their precious idol was marrying the young master of the Spencer Group. The male fans were somewhat heartbroken, while the female fans chose to offer their blessings. The buzz of discussion grew louder and more heated. Everyone was swept up in the news, and no one remembered Willow's accusation against Scarlett from just a few minutes ago. A genuine smile finally appeared on Scarlett's face. At this point, no one cared what Willow had said, especially since she had no proof. She had to admit, Willow was much tougher than before. Choosing to expose the bullying at this nationally broadcast, live event was smarter than her past self, but also far more naive. "Wait a moment." A deep male voice suddenly came from the front row behind the judges' panel. It was from the investment company that sponsored the competition. The director's gaze instantly locked onto the source. The person sitting there was their biggest financial backer. The show was already packed with drama. Was this boogeyman going to jump in at the last minute too? A man in a dark brown suit and gold-rimmed glasses was captured by the reporter's cameras. He sat leisurely with his legs crossed, but his eyes were incredibly sharp. Just one glance at this man was enough to tell you he was not to be trifled with. But given his special seating, the director had no choice but to hand him a microphone. "I am Damian Blackwood, the investor for this competition. First, congratulations to Mr. Spencer and Miss Hawthorne on your upcoming union." The man's deep, magnetic voice spoke, and the big screen immediately projected a high-definition, flawlessly handsome face. The female audience members couldn't help but gasp at his good looks. This handsome and wealthy diamond bachelor made even the two young masters from the Spencer and Townsend families on stage seem pale in comparison. Willow's gaze fixed on him, a hint of confusion in her eyes. "It's him. Didn't he go abroad? What is he doing here?" At that moment, Damian also looked at her. Their eyes met, and his dark pupils somehow gave Willow a sense of reassurance. It was strange and difficult to explain. Secondly, I was quite interested in what Miss Morrison just said about the bullying incident involving Miss Hawthorne, and I have unexpectedly obtained some partial evidence regarding this matter. He raised his hand and gave a loud snap of his fingers. The image of his face on the big screen was replaced by a grainy video. Everyone's attention was drawn to it. The image wasn't very clear, but it was recognizably a confined room. Willow recognized it at once. It was her home. The two people in the frame were her, trembling in shock, and a grim-faced Scarlett. In the video, Willow instinctively tried to flee, but Scarlett blocked her path. Scarlett's words came through the top of the line, $1,000,000 sound system, crystal clear. "Willow, you'll never escape from me. We have plenty of time to play. Just try not to faint this time, okay?" A collective gasp went through the crowd. She stood frozen on stage. The faces of Julian and Caleb were etched with utter shock. They stared in disbelief, then frowned deeply as they watched Willow being forced to eat a sea cucumber. Caleb couldn't bear to watch and closed his eyes. Julian stared fixedly at the big screen, motionless. "I don't actually like Caleb or Julian at all. I just enjoy the feeling of taking them away from you, bit by bit. How does it feel to have all your hopes crushed? You want to die, don't you? But I won't let you off that easily. Those two are such fools. I just say a few words and they believe everything." Scarlett's triumphant, arrogant words echoed throughout the studio. Julian involuntarily staggered back a step. You Scarlett," his hand, pointing at Scarlett, began to tremble. "So, you were the bully all along." The noise from the audience drowned out the video's audio. Scarlett screamed for the organizers to turn it off. "It's fake, this is all fake, the video is doctored." No one paid her any mind. The video continued to play smoothly. She shrieked curses and threats at the show's director. "Do you want to be blacklisted in this city? Believe it or not, with one word, I can make sure you never direct again." The director, backstage, was sweating bullets. He couldn't afford to offend the Hawthorne family, but he could afford even less to offend the living boogeyman in front of him. Seeing the director ignore her, Scarlett completely lost her mind. The gentle, amiable image she had cultivated in public for years had shattered. She couldn't keep up the act any longer. Scarlett rushed up to Damian, her eyes wide as she screamed, "Who the hell do you think you are? Do you know who I am? I am the only daughter of Victor Hawthorne of the Hawthorne family. You dare to cross me? You're dead, you hear me? You're dead." Damian stood up, looking down at her, a storm gathering in his eyes. "The Hawthorne family? Are you threatening me with the Hawthorne family?" Scarlett raised her hand to slap Damian's face, but the next second, her wrist was caught by a slender, pale hand. Before she could react, Willow raised her hand and slapped her. The loud, crisp sound of the slap echoed through the studio, and the chaotic environment instantly fell silent. Willow fought to control her trembling arm, forcing her body to stand protectively in front of Damian. "Scarlett, I won't give you another chance." She walked step by step toward the person who had brought her so much darkness. Each step felt like walking on sharp knives. She was afraid of Scarlett, terrified, but this time, she would not back down. "I will never give you the chance to hurt me again, and I certainly won't let you hurt the people I care about." Her eyes held a steely determination. She was like a thorny rose that had clawed its way out of hell, brave and beautiful. Scarlett went berserk. She let out a piercing shriek and lunged at Willow, intending to tear her apart, but she was grabbed from behind by the silent Caleb. He threw her forcefully to the side. His entire body radiated a restrained, simmering rage. His clenched fists made a sharp cracking sound. The words were squeezed from between his teeth, almost with all his might. "Scarlett, how dare you? How could you?" A group of well-trained bodyguards swarmed in through the studio entrance, marching straight to Scarlett and surrounding her. Their tall figures formed a human wall around her, like caging a rabid beast. She screamed and thrashed in despair. "Let me go, do you know who I am? You're all dead, my father won't let you get away with this." The bodyguards remained unmoved. Damien spoke softly. "Don't hurt the only daughter of the Hawthorne family." By now, the video on the big screen was more than halfway through. It showed Caleb and Julian confronting Willow, her own brother throwing her to the ground, her eyes obscured by the blood running down her forehead. The scene was so brutal that everyone in the audience gasped. Caleb looked down at his own hands. These were the hands that had brought his Willow to such a state. At that moment, he wanted to punch himself. He instinctively turned to look at Willow, but flinched away when he met her mocking gaze. He couldn't look at her. He hated himself even more for being so blinded by Scarlett. After all, Willow was his sister. Willow was the person he cherished most. How could he have believed Scarlett's one-sided story? His Willow, whom he had personally hurt so badly, she must have been in so much pain. Scarlett was kicking and fighting the bodyguards who restrained her. "Julian, are you dead? Can't you see your fiancé being humiliated like this? What are you doing?" Julian sneered. Only now did he realize he had been a puppet on Scarlett's strings all along. How ridiculous, so utterly ridiculous. He almost laughed at his own foolishness. "Scarlett, even now, you still want to trick me into fighting your battles. I've already lost Willow because of you. You bullied her for so many years and played me and Caleb for fools right in front of our faces. You shouldn't be a singer. You should be an actress." The video reached its end. Caleb and Julian left with Scarlett, leaving Willow alone, unconscious in a pile of stinking seafood corpses. In her last moment before closing her eyes, she was still murmuring, "Brother, save me." Caleb's heart died. His eyes were bloodshot as he watched the screen, seeing the girl he had personally destroyed. He thought, why don't I just die? At the very end of the video, a man rushed in, picked Willow up, and carried her to the hospital. The video ended, but the roar in the studio was unabated. The spectacular collapse of Scarlett's public persona brought the show its highest ratings ever. The director, naturally, was happy to let the live broadcast continue. Damien quietly approached Willow and put an arm around her shoulder. "Come with me." She turned her head to look at his profile, and a warm current suddenly flowed through her heart. This man had not only saved her, but was also willing to stand up for her in such a public manner. If she could really marry him, perhaps it wouldn't be such a bad thing after all. Damien led her to the center of the stage and held out a hand. "Where's the thing you prepared?" She finally unclasped her hand, which had been clutching a USB drive so tightly it was sweaty, and handed it to him. She then whispered in his ear, "How did you know?" A faint smile touched his lips. He flicked the pink USB drive into the air in a beautiful arc, tossing it to one of the bodyguards. The bodyguard gave him a sharp nod. Half a minute later, the screen, which had been paused, lit up again. This time, the background music was not a cacophony of noise, but an exceptionally suppressive piano melody. The video showed a small notebook. The notebook was being flipped, page by page, by a pale, slender hand. It was filled with dense writing, a young girl's diary, chronicling her life from the time she was found and returned home, to being bullied at school. Willow took the microphone Damien handed her, and looking at the diary entries, began to sing. The girl's voice was angelic, a sound that could have been kissed by God. It was a song even more sorrowful than her previous competition piece. As the video showed the pages of the bullying diary being turned, a once bright and sunny girl, step by step, became gloomy and broken, just as the handwriting on the pages grew more and more chaotic. On the other side of the screen, footage from an hour ago played, showing Scarlett's assault on Willow in the dressing room. Willow had intentionally provoked her. She had planned to publicly execute Scarlett at this high-profile event, but she lacked sufficient evidence, unless someone actually witnessed her being beaten. When she had returned home, the surveillance footage from her apartment was gone. She had assumed Scarlett was cautious and clever enough to have taken the evidence. So she had set up her phone in a corner of the dressing room, deliberately put her name on the door to lure Scarlett in, and then intentionally angered her into attacking. She had called the reporters, but not to expose Scarlett through them. They were useless for that. They were merely a tool to enrage her and witnesses. She hadn't expected that it was Damien who had taken the surveillance footage, but now it no longer mattered. The evidence of Scarlett's bullying was irrefutable. Everyone fell silent. The noisy, frantic Scarlett was now restrained by other bodyguards, unable to make a sound. The entire studio was filled with Willow's ethereal voice. As she reached the end, her voice became an uncontrollable tremor. Her body began to shake uncontrollably again. Her song, like her past, filled with unbearable memories, plunged into an abyss of isolation, confinement, beatings, and bullying. Almost everyone got goosebumps. Such an empathetic, infectious voice was something most had never heard in their lives. Caleb and Julian looked at her with identical expressions of heartache. Their girl, the girl they had once held in their hands to heal and save, had been pushed back into the darkness by them. They had stood with her tormentor, using the cruelest words and the most aggressive actions to wound her again, leaving her battered and broken. How could they, when the song ended, Damien took Willow's hand. She slowly pulled herself out of the sorrow, a single, crystalline tear falling from the corner of her eye, like a pearl dropped from heaven. This was the piece I had originally prepared for the championship. The bullying diary in the video was written by me in middle school. It contains all the evidence of the years of bullying I endured from Scarlett and several other classmates. It is also the true emotion that the song I just sang was meant to express. The venue erupted in thunderous applause once more. Nearly half the girls in the audience were in tears. No one could imagine what they would do if their food was filled with bugs, if their head was shoved into a toilet, and they were forced to swallow foul water. What if they were locked in an abandoned basement full of dead cats and rats? What if they were cut with blades, burned with fire, or had staples driven into their hands? They felt a genuine fear and terror, and a genuine empathy. Everyone looked at Scarlett with disgust and revulsion. A girl, sobbing uncontrollably, went up and hugged Willow. Then a second girl, a third this time, one girl after another stood with her, forming a solid, unbreakable wall. "Willow, I'm so sorry." Caleb was already a crying mess. He tried to approach her but was blocked by the girls. "Aren't you the one in the video who was bullying Willow with Scarlett? You don't deserve to be her brother." Julian pushed through the crowd and knelt before Willow. "Willow, let's get back together, okay? I was blind before I saw the wrong person. I admit I hurt you, but please just give me one more chance, okay? Willow, let's get married. I can't live without you. Can we just go back to how we were before?" His voice trembled, his expression shifting from deep remorse to a desperate hope for a beautiful future. He crawled forward on his knees. The girls didn't dare to stop him. Just as he was about to reach Willow, two long, straight legs blocked his path. Damien spoke with disdain. "Mr. Spencer, I believe I congratulated you and Miss Hawthorne on your impending union at the beginning. I didn't expect you to be making a move on my fiancé so soon." Julian's head snapped up. "What? Fiancé?" He looked in shock at Willow, who was standing behind Damien. "Willow, can you please stop this? I know I was wrong. You can punish me however you want, just don't use this fiancé thing to trick me and break my heart, please," Damien scoffed. "Ha, break your heart? Have you done so few things to break Willow's heart?" Willow stepped forward and took Damien's hand. "We ended things a long time ago." Julian stared at their tightly clasped hands, speechless. Willow gave a self-deprecating smile. "Julian, between us, wasn't it you who said it was over?" "That's because I was deceived by Scarlett," he roared, losing control. The next second, an uppercut from Damien silenced him. Half a front tooth, mixed with blood, fell from his mouth. Damien straightened up, casually rolling his wrists and neck as if nothing had happened, and spoke slowly. "Did you hear what Willow said? It's over between you. If I ever find out you're pestering Damien Blackwood's fiancé again, I won't let you off the hook. And I won't let the Spencer or Townsend families off the hook either." His tone was flat, but his words were utterly uncompromising. He then picked up the microphone, and all the cameras dutifully focused on his face. "All of the above is the complete evidence of my fiancé being beaten and bullied by Scarlett for years. I will hand it over to the police department and will pursue full legal responsibility against everyone who has ever caused harm to my fiancé. And one more thing, he put his arm around Willow's shoulder. My company's monitoring of this competition's voting channels detected the use of paid voters to rig the results. And, as my wife said, a person like her does not deserve to be the champion. Willow stood quietly by his side, looking at his exquisite and sharp features, and suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. The farce ended. The live broadcast of I'm a Singer concluded at its peak viewership, but the full video went viral online. Scarlett's crimes were proven beyond a doubt. Righteous netizens launched an all-out attack, digging up everyone who had colluded with her back then. They took screenshots of Scarlett's competition photos from her childhood to the present, labeling them with the word abuser in red, and the images were shared and downloaded relentlessly. Even the Hawthorne family's company stock plummeted to an all-time low. Damien, of course, would not let her off easily. The Blackwood family's undefeated legal team sent her to court. Dressed in a bright orange jumpsuit, she had lost all her former magical allure. Even as the judge's gavel fell, she was still muttering, "How is this possible? How is this possible?" Indeed, how could she have known she had provoked the most powerful family in the entire city? Damien Blackwood was someone even the Townsend parents had to grovel to. Or rather, even groveling might not have been enough. It was Damien who had approached Richard Townsend and asked to marry Willow. Richard felt like he must have done some great deeds in a past life for such a heavenly fortune to fall into his lap. "Danny, is that you?" Willow followed Damien back to his private villa in Moon Pavilion Bay. She looked at him quietly, asked her question, and waited for his answer. Damien looked at her, his eyes filled with undisguised affection, and slowly nodded. "It's me." He was Willow's childhood playmate. He had disappeared when they started school. The lemon and gardenia water combination was something they had discovered together by accident. It seemed that in Willow's memory, the impression Damien had left on her was perhaps not as strong as the lemon gardenia water itself. But Damien had etched Willow's name into his heart over and over until she was embedded deep within him. When he returned from studying abroad, the first thing he did was find Willow, only to discover that her life was not going well. But his uncles in the Blackwood family were all vying with him for the family's assets and inheritance. At 24, in just 6 months, he expanded the Blackwood family's influence to become the most powerful in the city, the true head of the family. And the first thing he did after that was to find her and be with her. Their wedding day was the grandest wedding the city had ever seen. Everyone was in awe and full of envy. It was just said that the bride had no family present. At the entrance of the wedding hotel, 2 men were held back by security. They looked at the photos of the bride, laughing and crying like they had gone mad.